Introduction. I apologize in advance for the necessary long length of this correspondence. I will make it as easy as possible for each recipient to ignore what is not of interest and go to what is. A sane person reading the following may find some events hard to believe. Even though dates of occurrences, sequence of occurrences, and/or occurrence locations may be inaccurate, rest assured all events occurred as stated. Para 2. My purpose in writing this is to make the readers aware of the maltreatment to expect when, if misfortune, deals you a similar fate. I also hope that someone reading this will care about the mistreatment of veterans and have the ability to make improvements. I seek no publicity and will make every effort to avoid it. Para 3. I have spent a lot of time over the past 20 years researching my ancestry. I discovered my paternal great-grandfather served in the Union Army. My maternal grandfather was the only volunteer from my hometown, Wake Forest, NC, to have served in the Spanish-American War, and he received shrapnel wounds at San Juan Hill. My father guarded POWs in North Africa during WTI, among other duties. I am the oldest of 4 sons, and we all served. Brother number 2 served on a naval patrol boat on the Mekong River in Vietnam. He died in 1997 of stomach cancer at the age of 49. Has the Johnson family not paid our dues? Para 4. Why am I forced to beg for what I have earned, been promised, and still denied? Para 5. I also learned during my research that I have Nigerian, Native American, and Irish, among others, in my bloodline. I have no evidence, nor do I believe, that any of the following events were a reaction to my skin pigmentation. A. Work history. I served in the U.S. Air Force from August 1964 to August 1968 initially. I served at Cam Ranh Bay, South Vietnam, from August 1966 until August 1967. Para 1. The aircraft used to spray Agent Orange offloaded the excess load at the end of the runways. We filled our sandbags with sand from those locations. The sandbags were used to build our defensive bunkers, and critters would avoid the bunkers. It was eventually concluded after years of litigation that Agent Orange was harmful to humans, contrary to what we were told. I was discharged from the Air Force in August 1968. Para 2. After graduating from Texas Tech University in 1973, I sought employment with the Texas Department of Public Safety. Para 3. I worked as a Texas State Trooper and criminal investigator from June 1974 until September 1997. My health insurance was provided by the state. B. Prediabetes diagnosed. In mid-1980, my wife, an Air Force nurse at the time, insisted I take a physical exam due to my frequent urges to urinate. I was diagnosed by the U.S. Air Force doctors at Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas, with prediabetes. I began receiving treatment at this time, using civilian facilities and my state insurance. Many years later, when I started having serious health issues, I learned that my exposure to Agent Orange had been deemed a contributing factor to some of the problems I was experiencing. C. Heart damage diagnosed. In mid-1990, after noticing a limp favoring my left leg, I consulted my PCP, who referred me to a specialist. It was concluded that I needed a hip replacement, but my cardiologist would not agree to the use of anesthesia due to the fact that I had experienced a silent heart attack resulting in heart damage. Could the heart attack be related to my exposure to Agent Orange? The pain in my left hip grew progressively worse, but was managed by over-the-counter products. D. Applied for benefits. In 2002, I applied for VA disability benefits and was informed that the start of my problems, 1980, could not be used as a start date for benefits. I had to use the date I applied, 2002, as a start date. Benefits began in 2003. E. Spinal stenosis diagnosed. In January 2006, I stood from my recliner and experienced excruciating pain in my back. I was transported to HCA North Cypress Hospital. After several visits to other facilities for numerous tests, I was eventually diagnosed with spinal stenosis and transported to a rehab facility in Humble, Texas for therapy. Spinal stenosis is attributable to Agent Orange exposure. F. Rehab in Humble, Texas. After a short stay at the Humble facility, it was determined that I would need extensive physical therapy. I was given the opportunity to choose a facility for therapy. I made the decision to seek physical therapy at the VA hospital in Houston, Texas. thinking that the VA, not being profit-motivated, would get me up and on my feet as soon as possible. VA Hospital 2006. Para 1. I was transported to the VA hospital in Houston, Texas, and for an inexcusably long length of time, 15 days, was refused physical therapy. I spent all this time in bed. The first excuse given was that I was not dependent enough to go through their physical therapy program. A doctor later told me that they did not have a bed. I told him that I overheard an attendant chiding my roommate for being a regular customer, inquiring as to when he would sober up. I asked the doctor if there were any alcoholics receiving physical therapy. Para 2. The doctor told me the VA is funded to care for veterans on a 4-tier priority level. He said I, being service-connected disabled, was top priority, but no vets were turned away. Para 3. An orderly told me that my discharge was imminent. I told him I lived alone, and my son Theo, attending college in Denton, Texas, had the only key to my house. The orderly told me that I had a problem, not good. I again told him that I did not have a key in my possession. He ignored me, and within a couple of hours, transportation arrived to take me home. When informed they would have to deposit me on my front lawn as I had no key, they refused to move me. The orderly angrily informed me that the VA would have to pay for my move, even though it was not used. I suggested the VA take the cost out of his pay. First VA deception. After about 15 days, in the VA hospital, I was approached by 2 doctors and a representative of a civilian rehab facility. One of the doctors told me that if I would agree to go to the civilian rehab facility for 2 weeks, the VA would return me to the VA facility to continue my rehab. I was not given a choice of which facility or informed as to what to expect at that facility. I agreed to go on the condition that I would be roomed only with a patient as alert as myself and be returned to the VA hospital at the end of the 2 weeks. The VA doctors, along with the representative from the civilian rehab facility, agreed. Legend Oaks, 2006. Para 1. Several years later, reading through my medical records, I discovered the VA doctor that promised to return me to the VA hospital after 2 weeks of therapy at the civilian facility in 2006 had made note of that promise in my medical records. Para 2. I was transported to Legend Oaks in Houston for physical therapy. My first roommate at this facility, a stroke patient, yelled for help constantly and died 3 days later. Promise broken by Legend Oaks representative. Para 3. I spent about 2 months at this facility and was never contacted by the VA to arrange my return. I assumed the VA had decided to pay for my stay here rather than return me as promised. Para 4. When I complained to a nurse about missing my every other day shower, she informed me that the records indicated I had refused my shower. I asked her if she would be happy with a shower only every other day, and she informed me that she did not need help to shower. I learned that a shower would be offered often as dinner was served, and if refused, not offered again. It was then recorded as a refusal. This was, I came to learn, was the only facility that had shower stalls where a patient could shower without assistance. I did need assistance getting in and out, and would often endure long waiting times to get out. I received 1 hour of supervised therapy a day here, often consisting of tossing a balloon with a patient that was too feeble to return it. I was allowed to go to the gazebo in my wheelchair and would get extra exercise using my wheelchair to navigate back and forth. Para 5. In July 2006, I left this facility and returned home, needing a cane to walk and able to walk only short distances. I could stand about 3 minutes before the back pain made it necessary to sit for about 3 minutes. I lived alone, prepared my meals, did my laundry, drove myself to medical appointments and grocery shopped using the motorized carts provided. I paid out of pocket for a bi-monthly house cleaning. used private insurance. Para 1. At the request of the VA, vets are encouraged to use our private insurance as opposed to the VA facilities. Now that I need the VA due to my limited finances and my inability to rely on my private insurance, the VA is totally unreliable. The VA will provide transportation to their facilities only, forcing me to pay out of pocket to travel for medical care at civilian facilities. My private insurance will only cover emergency transportation. The VA will reimburse me for medical travel expenses, but there is a time limit to request a refund. I have been unable to get needed dental care because I cannot get into a dental chair. At this time, I am unable to get in or out of bed unassisted and cannot utilize my bedside commode without assistance. It is impossible to complete the required forms to request refunds in a timely manner. The VA provides 13 hours of in-home assistance per week. This is only enough to get me out of or return me to bed. I am forced to pay to get out of bed. How much money have I saved the VA by using my private insurance since the onset of my Agent Orange-related medical problems? Incalculable. Yet I am required to beg and still not receive promised care. Para 2, my condition progressively worsened with my left hip and back. The pain at times would be nearly unbearable. The VA was providing tramadol for pain management, along with some other medications prescribed by civilian doctors. Some leading-edge diabetic medication, such as Tujo, along with other non-diabetic medications, are not available from the VA pharmacy. Using my private insurance, I have a hefty copay, KUKA Flex Forte. Part 1, in October 2022, I learned about an over-the-counter pain management product called KUKA Flex Forte. I consulted my PCP, cardiologist, and endocrinologist, and all three agreed the product was safe. I dropped tramadol and started taking this product. After about a month, I was totally pain-free. I was receiving physical therapy at home through my private insurance 3 times a week and could walk with my walker about 3 minutes before needing a short rest. Para 2. On October 2nd, 2023, L experienced an episode of extreme shortness of breath. My PCP instructed me to go immediately to the nearest emergency room. My daughter, Leisha, was visiting me at the time and followed the ambulance as I was transported to Cypress HCA Hospital. Leisha suffers from a compressed disc and can only provide very limited physical assistance. My Cypress Hospital visit. 1. Para 1, it was discovered that my heart was out of rhythm. While addressing that issue, it was discovered that I had fluid around my heart. 850 ml of fluid was drained. Para 2. I had been in the hospital 2 days when my best friend, who I had told about KUKA Flex Forte, called and told me that the FDA had issued a warning concerning this medication. I reminded him that I had consulted my doctors prior to taking it and was told that there were no harmful ingredients listed in the list of ingredients. He said that he had also checked with his doctors before starting the medication and was also given a green light. He has heart problems similar to mine. Para 3, the FDA warning stated the medication had an ingredient, diclofenac, that was not listed in the labeled list of ingredients. Could this be a contributing factor to my current condition? My friend is currently suffering from renewed heart-related problems, very similar to mine. Para 4, I was subjected to numerous tests and procedures during this initial hospitalization. Because of my severe anemia, loss of blood was suspected as a possible contributing factor to my conditions. A doctor informed me that he would order a stool sample, and the results would determine if an endoscopy was needed. At the time, I was experiencing bouts of constipation. When I had my next bowel movement, I informed my male nurse that the doctor wanted a sample. I asked him to take a sample because it would probably be 2 or more days before I could defecate again. He said he could not take the sample until the doctor ordered it. After the shift change, I asked the oncoming nurse if the doctor had ordered the test yet. She checked and told me the doctor had ordered the sample taken, the day before I had the conversation with the male nurse. She said the male nurse was new and probably did not know where to look for the doctor's orders. Para 5, Leisha and I observed a conversation in my room between this male nurse and a female CNA, wherein he went nose to nose with her, screaming at her to shut up, as she calmly tried to explain whatever he was upset about. When he left, Leisha asked her if he did that often. She nodded yes. I asked Leisha to find a supervisor. 2 supervisors responded. One seemed genuinely interested, but the other lady appeared more upset that the CNA had told us that his actions were a common occurrence. When informed that the CNA did not volunteer any information, but responded only when asked, she did not appear to be appeased. Para 6, the day after the above encounter, the male nurse offered me a pen and paper and asked me to rate him on his performance. I told him that when I entered the hospital, I could stand and walk, but now could not stand. Therefore, so far, he and his colleagues had failed. I never saw him again. Para 7. After being in the hospital, HCA Houston, Cypress, Texas, for approximately 1 month, I was released to go home. I was too weak to stand and was informed that I needed physical therapy. Without being given any choice of facilities, differences in facilities, or explanations as to what to expect from the facility, I was transported to North Houston Transitional Care. North Houston Transitional Care Visit. 1. Para 1. My initial assessment at North Houston revealed that I could stand, with assistance, and shuffle approximately 12 feet with my walker. Most of the remainder of my therapy consisted of upper body strengthening with very little attention devoted to standing. I now believe I was intentionally denied adequate therapy with the intent to keep me at this facility as long as my insurance would pay. My condition worsened. Para 2, I received only 1 hour of physical therapy a day. I spent the vast majority of the day in bed because I needed assistance to get in and out. The food was often served cold, was tasteless and/or unrecognizable. I took a photo of one dinner meal that consisted of 2 cold beef patties on an open-faced bun, no drink included. When I called the nurse, she took it to the kitchen and warmed it. She returned with several packets of mustard and mayonnaise, along with a soda. She apologized for not having any lettuce, tomatoes, or pickles. Para 3. About 2 weeks after arriving at North Houston Transitional Care, my hands began to feel as if I was playing in a sandbox. Almost every time while urinating, I would involuntarily, partially defecate. When I complained to a doctor, he discovered that someone, intentionally or accidentally, at HCA Cypress Hospital or at North Houston Transitional Care, had discontinued the levothyroxine that I had been taking for many years to control my thyroid function. The doctor said it was not included in my list of meds. This was done without my knowledge. He restarted the medication, increasing the dosage. He said it would probably take several months before my return to normal. Para 4. Each facility I used was given my personal medication list by Leisha. The list was often ignored, substituted, denied, tweaked, and/or not administered as directed. I am sure the cutting-edge medication prescribed by my doctors and on the list given to each facility was a higher quality than what I was given. Para 5. I was required to wear a brief due to my loss of bowel control. This condition persisted for about 3 months. My posterior is still being treated from the results of having to use this item and/or the constant inability to get it changed in a timely manner. On one occasion, I waited over 4 hours for a change. I tried to address the loss of bowel control and the inability to get a timely change by requesting a bedpan when I had the urge to urinate. After once laying on the bedpan for over an hour without assistance, I concluded it was less painful to utilize the brief. Para 6. One of the machines used to lift me from my wheelchair, electronically, into a standing position malfunctioned, causing me extreme back and hip pain by pulling me upright beyond my tolerance level. The parallel bars were not adjustable and were not wide enough to accept my wheelchair. I would be transferred to a smaller chair to gain access to the bars, but because the bars were not adjustable, I could not push myself to a fully upright position, which made this device, for me, useless. At least one other machine was inoperable. I learned when arriving at Encompass that all the sparse equipment at North Houston Transitional was outdated. Para 7. A lady, CNA, came into my room one night to dispense my medication. When I asked her what she was giving me, she responded by asking me if I wanted it. I told her that I could not know whether I wanted it if I did not know what it was. She stormed out of my room, praying to God to help her tolerate me until the end of her shift. She returned about 10 minutes later with a handwritten list. She was unable to pronounce the names of the meds, nor tell me what each one was for. I refused the medication and asked to be medicated by a nurse only. I later learned that each facility used a differently named medication than what I had used at home, making it impossible for me to know for sure what I was being given. When I explained this confusion at a later date to the praying caregiver above, she reminded me that I was not at home. Para 8. Soon after arriving here, my blood sugar level went over 400, and I was offered 6 units of fast-acting insulin. When I asked for more, I was refused, even after telling the nurse that my regimen required much more. Para 9, I instructed Leisha to contact my endocrinologist, Dr. Rakesh Patel, for assistance. After he intervened, I was given 20 additional units to their scheduled amount. I learned that having too high a blood sugar level was, in their facility, preferable to having a too low level. Para 10. The physical therapists at this location were more professional as a whole than the medical providers, even though I would often be put on a machine for a scheduled amount of time, and the instructor would not be present when time expired. If my workout time coincided with Jeopardy on television, I would often be neglected. Para 11. I went steadily downhill. North Houston did not have a wheelchair large enough to fit me. Leisha brought my large wheelchair from home. After about 2 weeks of using my chair, it was taken away, supposedly for maintenance. The right wheel brake did not lock properly. The chair disappeared, and after numerous attempts to recover it, I have been unable to do so. I enlisted the aid of Miss Rodriguez, nurse practitioner, and she could not locate the chair. Para 12, 3 female CNAs attempted to transfer me from my bed to my wheelchair, using a whole-body sling to get me out of bed and into the chair. Being blessed with common sense, I realized it was not going to work, with my body in a prone position, going into a sitting position onto the wheelchair to complete the transfer. They tried to convince me there would be no problem. As they lowered me onto the wheelchair, it tilted backwards, dumping me onto the floor. Luckily, the hoist being used in the wheelchair kept me from contacting the floor directly. My left leg was bent under me, helping to break my fall. Leisha, realizing the pain I was in, pulled my leg from under me, and I slowly eased to the floor, which was ice cold. After some debate, and with additional help, the CMAs managed to return me to the bed. Para 13. I encountered 4 caregivers at North Houston Transitional Care that went far out of their way to help me improve. A nurse, Melissa, a nurse practitioner, Ms. Rodriguez, who I would meet again at another facility, and 2 CNAs, Monica and Melanie. These 4 ladies went beyond the call of duty to make my stay beneficial. Para 14. I woke up at 2 a.m. one morning with the same shortness of breath that I had experienced on October 2nd. I pushed the assist button and waited 45 minutes with no response. Just before panicking, I used my cell phone to dial 911, and about 10 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. Para 15. An ambulance attendant asked me if I had been given my night medication. I assured him that I had not. When he asked the observing night nurse if I had been medicated, she told him that I had, as she rubbed the sleep from her eyes. HCA Cypress Visit 2. I was transported back to HCA Cypress Hospital. I think it was this visit where a male catheter was installed. The nurse failed to shave my groin area before taping the catheter. Later, when the improperly installed catheter leaked, requiring replacement, the pain caused by removing the tape was indescribable. After a short stay for observation, I was cleared to go back to North Houston Transitional Care. I agreed to return only if I would be allowed to medicate myself. I was told that if I would sign an agreement relieving them of the responsibility, I could do so. Upon arriving back at the facility, I was told that medicating myself was not an option, and I was not allowed to do so. Transitional Care Visit 2. Soon after returning to North Houston, Ms. Rodriguez, a nurse practitioner, discovered that my kidney function had deteriorated. I was again transported back to the hospital. HCA Cypress Hospital Visit 3. After being treated for kidney failure, I was released to return to the rehab facility. I refused to go back to North Houston. I was then given the option and agreed to go to Encompass Rehab Hospital, where I would receive 3 hours of physical therapy a day. Encompass Visit 1. Para 1. Upon arriving at Encompass on Wortham Center Drive in Cypress, Tucky TX, I was greeted by the director of the facility, Ms. Bollier. After a brief conversation, it was obvious that I would receive excellent care. She gave me a list of names and phone numbers to call if I had any problems that were not immediately addressed, to my satisfaction, by on-duty personnel. I never had to use the list. Para 2. Shortly after arriving at Encompass, I experienced episodes of vertigo. I also endured dangerously low blood pressure drops upon sitting up in bed. These issues, never experienced before, were corrected while at Encompass and have not recurred. I believe these problems resulted from not being medicated properly at North Houston Transitional Care. Para 3, every caregiver and employee I came into contact with at Encompass treated me as if I were their favorite grandfather. On numerous occasions, my call button would be answered by a non-medical employee who would immediately get me the needed assistance. On more than one occasion, two people would respond because the first responder would provide the needed assistance before canceling the call light. Para 4, only at Encompass did I have a primary physical therapist, Matt, and a primary occupational therapist, Melissa, assigned to me. I believe these two professionals, along with Dr. Lachina and the entire staff, would have had me home within the 30-day time limit imposed by Medicare. If I would have had the differences between the two facilities explained to me and had been given the opportunity to choose, I would have come here initially. Encompass staff made an organized effort to get me well and out within the 30-day time limit. Para 5, Dr. Lachina had scheduled my pain medication to enable me to tolerate enough therapy to get me back on my feet, in my opinion, given a little more time. Para 6, everyone at Encompass worked as a team or as a well-oiled machine. It was clear that the goal was to get me healed. The food was excellent, was served hot, and in a timely manner so as not to conflict with other activities. Everything was scheduled, and if changes were needed, were never done at the last minute. The patient's progress was charted, in his room, daily, and a conference held with all caregivers periodically. The one complaint I have about this facility may or may not be within their ability to rectify. Because I was so neglected at North Houston Transitional Care, I needed more time to recover than the Medicare-mandated allotted 30 days. Para 7. I immediately started contacting the VA with the help of Leisha, attempting to learn which civilian facility I should use if they did not have a bed downtown for me. I assumed that they did not have a bed, as I never got a response, after numerous inquiries as to which facility I could use. It is important to remember that I am 100% service-connected disabled, Agent Orange victim. Para 8, only at Encompass was a new, to me, caregiver, at shift change, briefed in my presence, with me being given the opportunity to add in. At all other facilities, I had to brief each caregiver, repeatedly, and it always fell upon deaf ears. Only at Encompass did the medical staff remember that I had major problems with my left hip, back, and shoulder. Para 9, I improved nearly beyond my expectations and was improving steadily when I was informed that my 30-day time limit was approaching and I would have to transfer to another facility due to Medicare guidelines. A nurse recommended Brighton, a nearby facility. Para 10, I got absolutely zero assistance from the VA as to which facility I could use. I would call to learn how to get the needed assistance, and the first person would tell me that I needed to talk to a second person. That person would transfer me to a third person. The third person would tell me that I was in the wrong area and would transfer me back to the person I had talked to originally. This, I would learn, was the standard operating procedure, with an extremely long hold time between each transfer. Para 11, when I left Encompass, I was told that my having to leave was because my insurance would only cover 30 days at their facility and/or Medicare rules prohibited a longer stay. When I arrived at CREST and discovered the difference between the two facilities, I obtained a loan to pay out of pocket to return to Encompass. I was then told by Encompass that Medicare rules prohibit out-of-pocket pay. Why would Medicare have such a rule? S. Brighton, CREST. Para 1. The day I arrived at Brighton, the name was changed to CREST Rapid Recovery Center. I was told that the company's new owners, or the building, was not on the VA-approved list. It was obvious to me that there would probably be a problem getting assistance from the VA to stay here. I renewed my effort to get assistance from the VA. Para 2, I was initially contacted at CREST by a limping male nurse. He entered my room, sat on my bed, nearly sitting on my leg as he stated that he had to sit down. The director of nurses came in shortly thereafter and inquired as to how things were going. I told her my stay here would be short if my first encounter was an indication of things to come. She asked me to give her a chance to make changes. Para 3, Encompass used a device called a Sarah Steady to move me from bed to chair and back. This device causes less pain to my hip and requires more physical effort on my part. It can also be used for physical therapy. Para 4. The director of nursing at CREST said they did not have a Sarah Steady and could not provide one. I asked her if I could buy my own and use it. She said I could. Para 5, and I got Leisha to order a unit and have it delivered to CREST. When the unit arrived, CREST refused to accept it. I was then told I could not use my personal device. They use a device that is electrically operated and causes extreme pain to my left hip. My condition steadily deteriorated. Para 6. Several days prior to my Sarah Steady being rejected, I overheard some employees outside my room discussing an expensive piece of equipment that had been delivered to a patient. They were amazed that he would be at this facility if he could afford such an expensive piece of equipment. Para 7. I was told upon arriving at CREST that my night meds would be dispensed no later than 10 p.m. At 10:20 one night, I used the call button to request my meds. The responding caregiver told me that I would get my meds when they gave them to me. I told her I was told by the director of nursing that the outside time limit was 10 p.m. She told me that I was lied to. I asked her to leave my room and send a supervisor. A supervisor appeared shortly, and as I was explaining my problem, the offender yelled from the hallway, "That's a lie." She refused my invitation to come, look me in the eye, and call me a lie. Para 8. After about a month at CREST, I was informed that my insurance had refused to pay and that I had to make a $2,400 payment. After making this payment, I increased my efforts to speak to the front office reference going to a VA-accredited facility. The administration did not respond. Para 9. After numerous unsuccessful attempts to talk to the director, I asked a nurse that I trusted to inform the director that I needed a conference. When I asked her later if she had delivered the message, she replied, "She did not say she did not want to talk to you." Para 10. I instructed Leisha to not make another payment until the director talked to me and to increase her efforts to get me back to Encompass, or home. There had been no assistance whatsoever from the VA. Para 11. CREST officials informed me that my private insurance had again refused to cover my stay and that I would have to pay again. I had made numerous attempts to get assistance from the VA with no results. I briefly considered not paying and going to the VA hospital, demanding assistance, but my 2006 experience with the VA was too fresh on my mind. Leisha told the front office I would not pay again until I had a conference with the administration. Para 12. The director of nurses and an admissions representative immediately came to my room. I informed them that this second payment would be the last and that they should increase their efforts to find a VA facility for me. Leisha was working diligently to get me back to Encompass, or to a VA-approved facility. I had been told repeatedly by CREST that the VA said they had no beds available, and that they, CREST, were waiting for the VA to tell them where to send me. The VA told me after I got home and filed a complaint that there were no records of any calls from any facilities on my behalf. Did someone at the VA not make a record of the calls made from CREST? Or did CREST fail to contact the VA in order to keep me at their facility? Para 13. Leisha made an off-site appointment for treatment on my hip. The facility arranged transportation. The appointment was missed because the transporter did not show up. The next day, a man representing the transportation company came to my room and apologized, saying his company dropped the ball. In mid-October, I received a $100+ check from CREST with no explanation. I have been unable to contact them to learn what the check is for and will not cash it until I do. No one will answer the phone. Para 14. I watched a CNA attempt to lift me when the battery was not installed in the lifting device. When I made her aware of the problem, she had to go to another hall to borrow a battery. Para 15. I had waited about 30 minutes after requesting water when the med nurse arrived with my meds. I told her I was out of water and had waited about 30 minutes. She placed my meds on my table, told me the CNA was busy, but would be in with water shortly, and left. Para 16, one CNA at CREST second shift would check on me hourly. She was over 2 hours late when she entered my room, clearly distraught. After some prodding, she confessed to having been locked in the room across from mine. She said the door had locked when she entered for patient care, and she had to call her off-site supervisor, who in turn had to call the off-site maintenance man. I asked her why she didn't call the front desk, and she said no one answered the phone. Outside calls were seldom answered when Leisha called. Para 17. After waiting over 90 minutes past the time I had been told my physical therapy would start, I completed the routine warm-up exercises alone. Just as I finished, Mary, the therapist, entered my room and asked if I was ready. When I told her that I was ready over 90 minutes ago, she shoved a list of her clients in my face as she explained that she could not be everywhere at once. I agreed and told her that I had completed the warm-up routine so we could go straight to the heavy part. She angrily replied that we would just do the warm-ups again. I said no, and she asked if I was refusing. I told her I was refusing to do therapy 90-plus minutes past the scheduled time. She said she would show I refused. When I told her to show the scheduled time and the refusal time, she said she would not. Para 18. A student nurse requested permission to evaluate me to determine if I needed speech therapy. She said I did not. The next day, another student performed the same evaluation and told me I did not need speech therapy. She told me their instructor would evaluate me and make the final decision. A few days later, a man came to my room and identified himself as the instructor for the previous two students and said he would evaluate me to verify their results. A lady approached me later, identified herself as the head of the speech therapy department, and needed to conduct a fourth evaluation. She said the two students agreed that I did not need speech therapy, but their instructor had decided I did. She assured me after her evaluation that I did not need speech therapy. Para 18. After obtaining the loan to return to Encompass, I learned that paying out of pocket was not an option. I was told that Medicare rules prohibited paying out of pocket. Para 19. About a week before the third $2,400 payment was due, Leisha called the director of Encompass, Ms. Bollier, in an effort to arrange my return. She got no answer and left a voicemail. Ms. Bollier, attending her son's wedding, returned the call within 10 minutes and apologized for not being able to answer immediately. Several days later, Ms. Bollier said I could return, but the insurance would not pay unless I returned immediately. Was this pro bono? If so or not, my thanks to the entire Encompass organization. Encompass Stay Two. Para 1. After 2 weeks back at Encompass, receiving a minimum of 3 hours therapy a day and excellent food, I was again steadily improving. I had reached the point of being able to transfer from the bed to my wheelchair without assistance, but could not reverse. Para 2. Around the end of my second week back at Encompass, I lost consciousness for a split second when I stood after using the toilet. Melissa, assisting me at the time, reported the incident to the medical team. It was decided that I should go to the hospital to make sure there were no other issues. Cypress Hospital, Visit 4. Para 1, I was, again, transported to HCA Cypress Hospital. After numerous tests, I was told that standing too fast after straining to have a bowel movement was most likely the reason I fainted. Para 2. After being cleared at the HCA Cypress Hospital, Encompass refused to take me back. Ms. Bollier was no longer the director, and I think the refusal may have been based on the belief that I could not improve further without additional medical attention for the left hip pain. This very well may have been an insurance issue. I was transferred to PAM Rehabilitation Hospital in Humble, Texas. PAM Rehab Facility. My stay at this facility is mostly a blur. I believe it is possible that I had been conditioned to expect subpar treatment and had become conditioned to accept it. It is also possible that some of the incidents laid out above occurred here. I am sure that this facility was better overall than all others, except Encompass. Back home. Para 1. I returned home April 13, 2024. My private insurance provided a hospital bed. Leisha had purchased a Sarah Steady to be used to transfer me from bed to chair and back. Para 2. Soon after returning home, I requested physical therapy and in-home assisted care from the VA. A VA representative came to my home, examined me to determine the kind and level of assistance I would need. Para 3. A VA provided physical therapist, Shannon, came to my home several days later and provided me with less than 18 minutes of physical therapy. About 2 weeks later, a VA representative phoned and asked me how therapy was going. When I told her that I had received only 18 minutes of therapy since I was approved, she said she would investigate and call me back. She called Leisha later and told her that the therapist, Shannon, had recorded visiting my home a total of 4 times. I have had no further contact with the VA concerning this issue. Para 4. I have requested the VA adapt my home to make it wheelchair accessible. This process has already started. Mr. Chester Nunez, VA representative, has been most helpful, but my chosen contractor is moving slowly. Para 5. I was initially granted 13 hours of in-home care weekly and have been denied more because I am not totally bedridden. Because I need help getting in and out of bed, using my bedside commode, and help with a bed bath, I have to pay out of pocket for an average of 25 hours per week, plus shared transportation expenses for my private caregiver. Para 6, when it became obvious that I would get no assistance from the VA, I concluded that I was on my own. The borrowed funds had been depleted. I have borrowed from my life insurance policy. I have learned from another disabled vet that some of the out-of-pocket expenses that I have incurred can be reimbursed. Para 7, and I have discovered, since I first started using the VA medical system in 2006, that it is not user-friendly in the Houston area. I had 4 doctors that were either vets and/or had worked at a VA facility tell me that if I lived in New York or California, I would get excellent care. A high school classmate, Agent Orange victim also, lives in California and gets great care, but he suffers from the effects of flesh wounds also. Is it possible that the VA, having been forced through litigation to compensate Agent Orange victims, are reluctant to do so? Para 8. On Thursday, September 5th, 2024, I called the VA Transportation Department to arrange transportation to the VA hospital downtown Houston to be fitted for a power chair. I was put on hold for about 40 minutes before being disconnected. I called the Tomball Clinic and left a message for Ms. Martha Chandler, asking for her assistance in getting me help with a transportation vehicle that would accommodate my wheelchair. The first vehicle VA sent for my original appointment would not accommodate my wheelchair, and I missed my appointment. Ms. Chandler arranged to reschedule my appointment and arrange transportation. Para 9. The next vehicle that showed up for my missed appointment could not accommodate my wheelchair. I was told, and it was confirmed later, that Dr. Welsh had erroneously indicated that I was in a power wheelchair. The purpose of the appointment was to be fitted for a power wheelchair. Failure to communicate? Para 10. On September 10th, 2024, after finally getting proper transportation, I went to the VA hospital and was measured for a power wheelchair. The staff informed me that it may take as long as 12 weeks for the chair to be delivered. I was told that a representative would come to my home with a demonstration chair in less than a week. As of October 19th, there has been no contact. The VA will provide transportation to their facilities only, forcing me to pay out of pocket to travel for medical care at civilian facilities. I recently learned that the VA will reimburse me for those expenses, but there is a time limit imposed to request a refund. At this time, I am unable to get out of bed unassisted. It is impossible to complete the required forms to request refunds. I have been forced to change optometrists from one that I have used for 30 years to a closer one. Civilian transportation is approximately $12 per mile. Round trip to my old provider is approximately 42 miles. Round trip to the new provider is approximately 16 miles in Para 11. Up to this point, I have made contact with only one VA representative, by phone, that expressed any interest in assisting me. Ms. Martha Chandler, patient advocate at the Tomball Clinic, has on numerous occasions made in-house contact with providers such as transportation, when I was unable to do so. I have waited on hold numerous times for an hour or more before being disconnected. Without the help of Ms. Chandler, I would have been unable to get any assistance at all. Para 12. In early September 2024, I filed an online complaint with the VA concerning my inability to get assistance with numerous issues, including the inadequate number of hours of in-home assistance provided. On September 13, 2024, I received a phone call from a VA representative about increasing my number of hours of in-home care. She told me that I would be contacted by phone reference, increasing my hours. She also told me there was no record of any contact from any of the rehab facilities concerning getting me into a VA-approved facility. Para 13. Who is responsible for reimbursing me for the expenses I have incurred while waiting for the VA and my private insurances to decide my fate? The VA and/or my private insurance carriers, including Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, Medicare, Health Select, Humana, and others, have refused to provide services that I and/or the state of Texas have paid for and/or have earned. Para 14. I recently had a Watchman installed in my heart. My cardiologist believes a pacemaker may be needed soon. How much, if any, of my current problems can be attributed to KUKA Flex FORTE, HCA Cypress Hospital, North Houston Transitional Care, Eagle Crest and the Veterans Administration? Home, Para 1. During my experience with the medical profession from October 2nd, 2006 to date, I discovered some disturbing facts concerning healthcare in the Houston, Texas area. The most disturbing is the amount of conflicting rules, regulations, policies I was subjected to. The most disturbing being, why was I allowed to pay out of pocket to rot in a rat hole like Eagle Crest, but not allowed to pay out of pocket to thrive at Encompass? Who has decided that I have lived long enough? Para 2. Around the early part of July 2024, I contacted the VA and requested a lift recliner. About 2 weeks later, I received an electric platform device designed to be used in a chair as a lift. I tried this device in my wheelchair. It raised me, but would not return to the low position. I contacted the VA 4 times requesting assistance, chassis instructions on replacing this device, as per the instructions included with the unit. As of October 23, 2024, I still have a useless unit and have received no assistance from the VA. I was told the provider would be notified. Para 3. On October 18, 2024, a VA provider came to my home at 8 p.m. for my allotted 2 hours of care, which would normally include putting me to bed and a bed bath. Not needing a bath, I spent a few minutes explaining my routine, as she was new to me. She was originally pleasant. At around 9 p.m., as we started the process of getting me into bed, her verbal demeanor changed, becoming verbally irritable. After she finished the process of getting me into bed, she cut loose. She stated bluntly that I would never see her again. Before I could respond, she proceeded to tell me that she lives in Spring, TX, and that it is an hour drive. She continued that her bedtime is 9 p.m., and she would now have to call her son, wake him up, and have him talk to her until she got home, to keep her awake. She said she does not drive at night, but she agreed to come because her supervisor told her that it would only be an hour and agreed to pay her for 2. She rambled on about caring for autistic children and having one boy that would not sleep, so she got the doctor to mediate him, allowing him to sleep at night so she could get her sleep. She ended by saying she gets up at 5 a.m. and this would disrupt her system. Para 4. When I originally reached out to the VA for assistance, they requested the name of my VA PCP, Dr. Welsh, at the Tomball Clinic. She has very limited information concerning my medical history because the VA and civilian professionals apparently cannot communicate. I see her once a year, yet she is the doctor that determines what my needs are and/or what equipment I need. How is this beneficial to the veteran? Dr. Welsh has no long-term ongoing knowledge of my current condition or what my needs are. In essence, I am being punished, denied services needs for doing what the VA requested I do, use my private insurance. Para 5. On October 28, 2024, I was contacted by a VA technician regarding the power wheelchair I was measured for on September 10, 2024. She said the power chair was not ready and requested I choose a color for a manual chair to be delivered while I wait for the power chair. I was told when measured to expect the chair within 6 to 8 weeks. This is my observations. 1. The rehab facilities are dominated by caregivers that work more than 8 hours daily at different locations and/or for different companies. 2. The quality of care decreases from first shift through third shift and takes a deeper dive on the weekends. 3. The quality of care received depends mightily upon the mental alertness of the patient and/or how often family members visit. 4. Most facility rooms, except Encompass, are arranged to discourage long visitations, chairs uncomfortable, overnight visitations, and/or have strict visiting hours. 5. There are no designated on-site supervisors for the overworked CNAs. I often overheard CNAs complaining about having as many as 20 patients. Dietary will deliver a meal, leave it out of reach of the patient, making it necessary for the patient to call another department, nurse, to rewarm it or place it within reach, cutting into her patient care time. No one on the floor chart hall is in charge of the team. 6. I became aware, near the end of my experience in the above facilities, that I was required to be turned, rotated in my bed every 2 hours. This was never done. Are there exceptions to this rule? 7. I was never offered a morning wash-up while bedridden, and only once while bedridden was I offered the opportunity to brush my teeth. 8. All rooms, except at Encompass, appeared to be designed for totally bedridden patients who were unaware of their surroundings. One caregiver would move the mobile bedside table and not return it to the original position, requiring me to call another caregiver to make it accessible. The same scenario would often occur with the call button, which I believe was often intentional. I had the phone number for the nurse station at each facility I was in, but could never get an answer. I never needed to call the nurse station at Encompass. 9. The overhead lights were extremely bright and would often be left on, requiring a call for assistance. The headboard light was too dim, and the switch was often out of my reach. My vision has not returned to normal. 10. The door to my room was repeatedly left open, after numerous requests to keep it closed. The screams of my fellow residents were loud and often. My daughter put a sign on my door at North Houston asking for it to be kept closed, which was often ignored. 11. 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep was impossible. The routine at Eagle Crest started at 4 a.m. with a blood pressure check. At 4:30, often the same caregiver would return to check my blood sugar. At 6 a.m., the nurse occasionally would come with my pre-meal meds or bring them after my meal had been eaten. 12. A breathing treatment was ordered every 4 hours at Eagle Crest. This was seldom administered as ordered. I would often wait for the scheduled 11 p.m. treatment until midnight, fall asleep, and be awakened at 1 a.m. for the treatment. It was seldom administered as ordered. 13. There appeared to be no effort made except at Encompass to group patients according to care requirements or keep doors closed. I constantly heard patients screaming for help. A neighbor entered my open door at Eagle Crest several times, saying she could not bear being alone. 14. There is a major language barrier between the patients and the caregivers, and between the caregivers themselves. 15. 3 caregivers at Eagle Crest were extremely caring. My thanks to Ruth, Amaya, and Bobby. There were several more that were caring, but were not assigned to me often enough for me to remember their names. The administration was absolutely uncaring liars. Most of the caregivers were equally uncaring. 16. All mediocre caregivers had an angle to avoid work. I learned by listening that one of the caregivers that I fired was sent to another hall that had less demanding patients, too unaware to know they were being neglected. 17. I made numerous requests at Eagle Crest to receive pain medication at least an hour prior to physical therapy. This request was never honored. 18. The landline phone was inaccessible at all locations to a bedridden patient. 19. Every caregiver I encountered that spoke with an Asian accent and/or had Asian, Oriental features were excellent, caring individuals. Every caregiver I encountered that had Nigerian, African features and/or accents were totally brutish, impatient, and uncaring, comparatively. 20. I wholeheartedly believe the long-term facilities intentionally bleed insurance by providing inadequate care. My insurance companies never requested feedback about the quality of care I was receiving. 21. There is no doubt in my mind that I would not have survived the above ordeal without the help of my son, Theo, and daughter, Leisha. If I would have been a stroke patient, unaware of my surroundings and no advocate, I would surely have left feet first. 22. I have instructed my family to transport me to the nearest military facility hospital when my funds are depleted. I was issued a military ID card upon being certified 100% service-connected disabled that supposedly entitles me to use those facilities.